calendar for the course. So we get our kind of a bummer in our schedule, right? Classes didn't start till Tuesday, so we missed the first Monday, and then we had MLK Day, so we missed yet another Monday. So Monday, classes that meet on Monday got kind of a bum deal this quarter. So we have the intro, adding and subtracting, we might get that done in a day, multiply and divide fractions, we might get that done in a day. And we get an extra day here to finish up anything in chapter 5 before the exam, so which is in a couple weeks from now. And there are some previous exams I posted here with some answers. So there's an exam 1 example, exam 2 example. I used to give what's called an exit exam in this class to make sure people could do arithmetic with fractions without a calculator. But since we don't meet in person and we don't have a testing center, I don't know what I'm going to do about that. So we'll see. Otherwise, this resources page is going to be pretty handy today because we are going to play with color rods, and we are going to play with colored tiles, and we're going to play with fraction stuff, and we're going to play with pattern blocks. We might play with the number line. So we might use all of these apps today, if not between today and the next class. Let's see, somebody just rang the bell and entered the room. Welcome, Avali. I'm glad you could join us. So this resources page will come in handy. So at some point, you're gonna come back here. So I would get it open now and maybe leave it open if you need anything else in another tab. So I'm gonna leave that there and open up a new tab here. So I don't need the calendar anymore. Let's see, I graded activity 4.1 and the reading for 4.1 and 4.2. I'm halfway through the activity on the prime sieve. That one is a little harder to grade because I got to consider all of your comments, and then there were some harder calculations on that one. But there were some interesting commentary, observations people made when they were looking at that grid of prime numbers. And I will share some of those when we review for the next test. Otherwise, the reading assignment for section 5.2 is due today, and there are a lot of topics to cover in the intro to fractions, which we're going to go over today. So I found that there were 10 main topics listed in section 5.2. So I look forward to seeing yours. Oh, wow, we already have 7 out of 14 in there. You guys rock and roll. Good job. All right, so let's see. I got a test to see if my other camera works. So let me see. Stop sharing. Oh, I got to turn off the fancy background. Darn it. I was enjoying being at the beach. Oh, well. Hope you all had a good long weekend.
Hey, Gary, I also had a question about number 28. I meant 29 on the
in the homework?
Yeah.
Awesome. So good to have a homework question. All right. Oh, shit. What did I just do? Okay. Wrong button. Which button do I want? Oh, I want this. Make sure this works. So I mentioned those virtual. There we go. Virtual manipulatives. So I think we played with these color tiles before. So I'm going to use the real and the virtual ones in a moment. And then I had my color rods. So we will play with these guys virtually and for real in a moment. And then I got a new set of toys here called pattern blocks that we're going to play with today. And I'll show how we can use each of those to kind of play around with the idea of what is a fraction and how we can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So we'll come back to that. All right. In the meantime, I'm excited to hear that we have a homework question. So let's go back. And something near the, let's see, in the greatest common factor, you had a question? Was it like number 21 maybe? One of these?
It was number 29.
29, which section? There's no, this only goes up to 21. In the fraction section?
Oh, on 5.2, Homer.
Oh, okay. So
Sorry.
we haven't even gone over 5.2 yet. So I'm gonna make a note that you asked that, and I will come back to that. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So congratulations on being ahead. So 5.2, number 29. All right, we'll get there. Okay, so onward to plane fractions. There we go. There we go. Whiteboard is functional. So section 5.2. Fractions. So the just a reminder about some terminology related to fractions. When we work with a fraction, like let's pick on 2/3 for a minute. We have lots of ways to say it. We could say it as 2/3. We could sometimes call it 2 out of 3, 2 divided by 3, 2 over 3. So there's lots of language we use when we're reading something like that. Other things that are important is we have a top number called a numerator, and we have a bottom number called the denominator. And just keep in mind that fraction bar ultimately is a division. So we're working on some kind of division there, and there's different ways to interpret that. As far as the interpretations go, how we represent fractions, that's related to how fractions occur in our real life, in our existence. And there's lots of different things that come up when we're working with fractions. So for example, I might have this region here, and that region can be nicely cut up into strips. And so if my drawing was better, then I was hoping that this right here, that strip right there, would represent 1/3 of the whole region. Maybe we'll call it an area instead of region. That's similar but slightly different than having, let's say, this is my best picture of a green apple. And here's another green apple. And I don't have orange, so I'm going to use red. And then here's an orange. So 1/3 of a group. It's a slightly different idea than 1/3 of a region. All of these are about the idea of a part of a whole, though. So part of a whole is one way we think about fractions, and it could be this kind of continuous region, but it could be discrete items like people or fruit. So that's one option we have when we're talking about fractions. But fractions come up in other ways in our existence. And so another way they might come up is just like a ratio. So for example, let's take, so I could represent this as a ratio of 2 to 3, and these are pointy things compared to round things. Other times the ratio might be something like in a group of people, 2 out of every 3 could be men versus women, right? And this isn't part of a whole, right? If I was part of a whole, it would be, say, 2 out of 5 people were men, but here I'm saying 2 men to 3 women. So when I look at something like this, it's either a ratio or sometimes it's a rate. And an example of a rate would be like miles per hour, for example, but ratio is the more common term there. So that's a different idea. Here I have 5 things, but I'm saying, hey, 2 of them have this description, 3 of them have that description. So a ratio is a different way of talking about a fraction than a part of a whole, but it is an important thing that comes up in our reality all the time. So we have ratio for a fraction. Sometimes though, fraction is just a division problem. So for example, on the way home, I'm gonna go grab some snacks, and maybe my snacks are going to be some candy bars. And so let's say, here's one of my candy bars. Make that the size I wanted. Made it a little bit too big. Let's say that's my candy bar there. And then I got another one. I got that to be the same size. So these are supposed to be the same size candy bars. So I have 2 candy bars here. But when I get home, there are 3 kids that want these candy bars. What do I do about that? Well, that's a ratio of 2 to 3. It's a division. I have 2 things to divide among 3 people. Right? So I'm actually going to have to figure out how to whip out a knife and do a division here. And if I'm careful with my knife and I cut in just the right spots, then this is kid number 1 gets that much, and kid number 2 gets that much, and kid number 3, they get that much right there, and they should each get the same amount. How much did they get? Well, they got 2/3 of what I have here. But that's different than taking one whole thing and cutting it into 3 pieces, then grabbing 2 of them. So that's a little bit different than a part of a whole, because here I have 2 wholes, right? So that's another place division comes up when we're playing around with fractions. So far the main ideas for fractions that come up most often, we have the part of a whole, which could be an area or a group. We have a ratio, which is one kind of thing compared to another kind of thing. And that's definitely not part of a whole. And then we have this division aspect of playing with fractions, which is, I got more than one whole to work with, and I got to divide it up. It is definitely a fraction that's going on here. Each kid's not going to get a whole one in this case, but it could be, it depends on the numbers we're playing with. But these are 3, maybe 4 different ways of looking at what a fraction is. And there's another thing that I think is kind of different, the idea of distance, or like a point on a number line. And I often view this as a different way of viewing fractions in our reality. So, we've got some number line here, and on that number line, we're used to doing like, hey, here's 1, or 0, excuse me, and then maybe that's 1 over there, and then 2 would be right there. So once we play with fractions, we have these new places on the number line, like this place right here is 2/3 of the way between 0 and 1. And over here, we have 1/3. And over here, we have 1/2. So we have all these different fractions that now fall in between here, and they could either be viewed as that exact position on the number line or the distance to get to that position. And they're both related to that point. But I think that's like a 4th or 5th instance of how we view fractions in our reality. So there's a few different concepts that fractions come up to deal with those concepts. And then with respect to those, we want kids to be able to play around and interact with these fractions in different ways. So I'm going to switch over to talk about part of a whole and some other ones. Stop the share. All right. So let's see, I want to be in speaker view. There we go. So hopefully you should be seeing my piece of wood here that I'm going to demonstrate some things on. So as far as 2/3, there's lots of ways to show up these different toys. So with these color tiles here, right, that's one version of 2/3 with the color tiles, but there's many different ways we can put them together to make 2/3, and really to help kids' brains wrap themselves around what a fraction is. The more different ways we can interact with fractions, the better. So that this is also 2/3, okay, is an important thing too. So there's still 2/3 blue pieces here. And now we're just looking at it in a slightly different way because we have more stuff to play with. But this is also a way to talk about equivalent fractions. So let's switch back. And get the virtual toys so I can draw. And so I mentioned this resources tool might come in handy, and I want the online color tiles. And so you can just drag things on here. So let's see, my first one looks something like this. And when you get them near each other, they should just kind of slide into place, have this magnetic attraction, right? So this one pretty clearly 2/3 of them are blue. There's 2 out of 3. But we need kids to be able to recognize more complicated situations that still represent a particular fraction. So let's take a look at this one right here. So my claim was that this right here, 2/3 of the tiles are blue. And some kids are just gonna get it. Other kids are not. It kind of depends on their past experiences. And so we're gonna have to then break this down. Say, okay, well, how many blue do we count? Well, we count 1, 2, 3, 4 blue. And thinking about the concept here of part of a whole, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 altogether. So that's 4 out of 6. Some kids, again, will kind of see the grouping there, but others, right, we got to get more hands-on and physical and say, all right, well, let's move these around a little bit. What if we move this one there and that one here? And now rethink it. So that's just the same blue and red pieces, right? We're just moving them around. And we can still see that 4 of them are blue out of the 6 total. But now we've got it broken up in these nice rows and columns. And so, right, here's one column, and here's the other column, and here's the other column. So although this can be viewed as 4, 6, we can also say, well, 2 of the columns are blue and there's 3 columns altogether. So this is another way to represent 4, 6. And for a lot of kids, that's, you know, when they start making those realizations, these are pretty big ideas that are forming in their head. And it's not obvious to most kids. And we've got Mason in the group. Hey, Mason, welcome. So those are the color tiles, and a lot of classrooms have sets of these. Let's take a look at a different set of toys. Stop the share again, move those out. And then we played last week with the color rods. So get my set of these out. One here. We'll look at the online ones too. So if you don't happen to have a set of these, please, nope, I got that one. Which one's next? Is it green? Yep. Okay. Then yellow. those up a little bit. All right, so here's my set of color rods. Sometimes they're called Cuisenaire rods or color strips. And starting at the white, we have, that's 1 unit. So this was, the red is 2, light green is 3, purple is 4, yellow is 5, dark green is 6, black is 7, brown is 8, dark blue is 9, and then the orange is going to be 10. So a lot of times I put them together with a key like we saw in one of the homework problems before. And we can make lots of different fractions when we're playing around with these right here to talk about 2/3, for example. So one of them would involve, say, actually let's leave that together and just grab a new set. Oops. Sorry, I'm not used to playing on this here. Move you this way. Stay in camera. Okay, good job. So let's take the light green. See that there? Compared to the red. And so that is one way we could represent 2/3. We could use some whites with the green to talk about 2/3. And there's many other groups that you can make when you're doing that. So those are the Cuisenaire rods or color rods or color strips. And we have a virtual set of those you can get from the resources page and online color rods. And this one right here loads with a problem. And so there's a bunch of different problems that kids can try and answer when they're on the screen, or you could just ignore the problems like I do and just play around with this as your canvas here. And you can drag these in and place them where you want. So there's, say, a half. White is 1/3 there. Let's see. 2/3 and so on. So there's lots of comparisons we can make when we're playing around with these. And so these are sometimes called Cuisenaire rods, or color strips. And we'll play with those some more. All right, next set of toys. Are the pattern blocks. So the pattern blocks have a bunch of different shapes in them. I'm only picking out the ones I want to play with. Let's see, there. So I have the hexagon, I have the trapezoid, and the design of these things is so that the edges of them are the same length and they have some common angles when I'm playing with these. So then I have the rhombus, kind of fun because I can take 3 rhombuses and make myself a hexagon. And then we have the green triangles. And again, those can be used to make a rhombus or a trapezoid or a hexagon. And keep in mind, anytime you bring toys out in the classroom, kids are going to find all kinds of exciting things to do with them, not necessarily what you wanted. And so definitely leave some time and room for the kids to just mess around with them and be goofballs and experiment. I think that's a super important part of education, messing around, experimenting, being an educational goofball. And so with these, I can demonstrate different fractions. And all these toys have their pros and cons. But I think the act of physically holding these things is pretty important. Like, some kids have to put one set on top of the other to really believe, to really know that, hey, when I put the blue on top of the yellow there, wow, they fit perfectly. Okay, so the blue must be 1/3 of the yellow, right? And the red is 2/3, or sorry, 1/2. Going to head to a different problem. How about the blue and the red together? What does that give me? Anyone? Anybody out there? The blue is what fraction of the red? All right, we'll move along once somebody gives me some feedback there. Oh, there we go, 2/3 from Jimmy. Thank you, Jimmy, for participating in today's class. You're gonna get a gold star in your paper. All right, let's switch back to the other screen. And there's a pattern blocks app here. And some of these apps, like a bunch of different companies made their own version. And so the pattern blocks, I found a bunch of different ones. Today, this one's my favorite, but there are other ones out there. So these I can just bring in onto the screen, and they snap together too, which is kind of nice. No, I don't want you, go away. Oops, missed. And you can have all kinds of fun with these. So I use these when I'm playing with fractions and when I'm doing some geometry projects with kids, and they're fun and useful. So we've got the pattern blocks that we're going to play around with in a moment. We've got the Cuisenaire or color rods, and we've got the color tiles to play with there. Another app, and there's new apps coming out all the time, and there's existing ones I've never heard of. So if you find some cool math app, be sure to share it with us. The Math Learning Center recently came out with this fractions app, and it's got some pretty cool stuff in it. So let's see, I can bring in a bar and I can resize it. And then I can say how many parts I want it to have. And if the number of parts I want isn't here, like maybe I wanted 7 parts, I can go in and say, I want 7, please. Or maybe I want 11. And then, okay. And then I can go in and color some of these. And then I can, oops, there we go. I can stretch out the color, and I can turn some of them off if I want to, or back on. Let's see what else. I can label it. And so it puts a label up here, and I don't think I can blow this up, can I? It looks kind of sketchy blown up, but it says 4/7 right there. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 out of a total of 7 pieces there. And you have options of playing with rectangles, or you can play with pies, and you can split those pies up into pieces and play around with them. And then you have a bunch of different colors that you can play with. So maybe I want 7s there too. And then let's make that one orange, or okay, orange. And then I can go around coloring, playing around. So I can do 4/7 in a slightly different way there. So this one I thought was pretty cool. There's a pen you can write with. I've only started playing with it a little bit, but I did think that the labeling and the colors and the resizable bars are pretty nice. And it's pretty nice for comparisons too. So let's see, click here, move that over. So for example, I can try to show somebody how 7ths might be different from 5ths, because these can be lined up and set to be the same size. And how do I get back into it? I broke it. Ah, I gotta make a new one apparently. I swear I could edit them once I had them up there. Okay, maybe not. Let's learn something new every day. So it looks like I have to give it a number and then edit it after. So we can see what's the difference between a 5th and a 7th by having 1 be the same size for each of them. So maybe somebody thought 4/7 was pretty close to 2/5. We could play around with that idea and see it better. So 2/5 there, and then rearranging those 4/7. We can see 4/7 is definitely bigger, and some kid says, well, it looks like 2/5 is about the same size. And yeah, it's about the same size, but 2/5, 3/5 is a little bit bigger. So it just gives us a nice way to kind of compare with these tools that draw the lines for us in the right spot. All right, so fraction, ideas, representations, there's a lot of ways we can put them together. Is there anything else I want to look at? I'm not ready for the number line yet. All right, let's back out for a minute. And so this week, we've got the reading assignment, oops, down here in section 5.2, the activity, and then the homework, and we'll come to that homework question shortly. For the homework, the activity, we've got just some comparisons we're going to make using these color rods here, and I have a link to that tool I was just using. And then we're going to ask ourselves some questions, like the red strip is what part of the dark green strip? So whenever we ask about what part of, right, that's a fraction question, so I want to be able to come up with an answer for it and be able to show why that is the answer. So I'm going to do one of these, and then we'll break out into groups and try and answer the others. So I got a couple group activities we're going to do today. And Amanda, hello Amanda, welcome. So then the second part of this activity is to kind of do the same thing we were doing above, but we're going to do it with the pattern blocks instead. And there's a link to the pattern block tool I was just using, same one that's in the resources. And we're going to make comparisons again. This shape is what part of that shape. And what will happen on each of these is we'll have an explanation and we're going to draw a picture. And either the picture could be a screenshot or you can try and draw these things and label them to the best of your ability. And so I'll do a little of each here for that. One thing I noticed about like this fractions one here, if I right click on it, it gives me the option to save the image or copy it so I can paste it somewhere. So just show that for fun. This would be a couple of fractions. And so that it makes a nice PNG graphic for me that I can load into any document like a Word doc or Google Doc. And the tools are a little nicer than the drawing tools in Word and the drawing tools in Google. So I can get this image that I can then insert in some other document. And I'm not sure if these other ones have that same property. Let's see, right click. And yeah, so they don't have that ability on this one right here, but I could always do a screenshot. If you're not sure how to do a screenshot on your computer, ask and I'll help you figure it out. I think most of you have figured that out by now. Let's see what else. There's this one. This one doesn't allow us to make an image. We'd have to do a screenshot of it too. And I'm pretty sure this one, oh, this one has copy the image. Okay, so some of these have copy the image or save as an image, others don't. So then we have to resort to a screenshot. Okay, so let's go back to this one right here. So I'm going to do the first question. The red strip is what part of the dark green strip. And so that means I either have to have the toys in front of me to play with or I have to have the app. And I already have the app up here somewhere. There it is. So the red strip is what part of the dark green strip. So let's clear everything and grab a red strip and a dark green strip. And I can clearly see it's smaller, and the grid could help me count that here. So I see the red strip has 1, 2 squares, and the green one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I could say it's 2/6. But I could also just line up a bunch of red ones, making a train. We talked about trains with these before. And say that, oh, there's 3 of these to make a whole green one, and so one red one is 1 out of 3 to make the green. So there's a couple of ways to answer these questions. So let me copy this and draw on it in my notebook. So the question I'm addressing is from the activity. And this is part 1, question A. The red strip what part of the dark green strip? And so we want to answer that, and we also want to be able to explain why. And so you could say the picture shows why, and then that's definitely true. So I have a couple of answers here. So thinking about these squares here, there was 1, 2 of those squares that make up the red, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my first thought on the answer here was, well, okay, the red strip is 2 out of the 6 that make up the green one. So putting that to restate the question, the red strip, not strip, is 2/6 of the dark green strip. Right, so that answers the question, but it doesn't answer why. So demonstrating it, so I need the picture. So either I need to have a screenshot of it, or I can just redraw it. So maybe on a piece of paper, you're going to draw out a red. And if you don't have colors, you might label it red, not rad, red, and put it next to the green. And we have the size of 2 versus the size of 6. So then I could say something like, since red is 2 squares long, while dark green is 6 squares long. So some kind of justification, however you decide to do it. And similarly, we could justify an answer instead of 2/6, we could justify an answer of 1/3, and you'd have a slightly different reason for that. All right, so let us get busy working on this together.